Hi, welcome to this quick tutorial video on how to use Power Query and Power BI to apply some custom bins to your data so that you can use those bins in visualizations. It's a very simple thing to do. It's a very common problem, so it's good to learn how to do this really well. We're going to start in Power BI, and we're going to go up to the top left and click Get Data. And for this, we're just going to load an Excel workbook that I've got prepared for this demo. The file is called Segments. So I'll load the segments file, and I know that I want the data sheet, so I'll select the checkbox next to data here, and instead of just clicking load, I'm going to click transform data so that we can go into Power Query to make these changes. This isn't always the best thing to do, but in a lot of cases it's easier to do it in Power Query so that when the data loads into Power BI, you have all the information available to you. Very simple sheet that we've loaded here. We've got a client name down the left, and then we've got some revenue numbers across 3 different regions: the Americas, Asia Pacific, and Europe, Middle East, and Asia. And what we want to do is create some logical bins based on the total revenue for each account. So we're going to have to do 2 things. We're going to have to create a custom column and then a conditional column. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go up to the Add Column tab at the top, and we're going to choose Custom Column. That'll open up a small dialog box, and we'll just type total revenue here. In the bottom section, where we can actually type our formula, we're going to add up the total of the 3 regions. So to do that, you can just type an open bracket, and the IntelliSense will give you access to the columns that you have. So we'll say AMER plus APAC plus EMEA. Oops, I typed APAC twice. Plus EMEA. There we go. And we'll get rid of the extra bracket and type OK. And you'll notice that it's added a total revenue column here, but there's a problem. You're seeing nulls in places where you should see values. And that's because this formula won't automatically add together these numbers plus these nulls. So let's fix that. We're going to highlight these 3 columns together using the Shift key when clicking on each one. We're going to go back to the Home tab. And in the transform section, there's a function here called replace values. We'll click replace values, and we're going to tell it which value we want to replace. We want to replace null, so we just type null, lowercase n, and we want to replace it with 0 so that we have all numeric values. Once you're done, choose OK, and the columns will update. But you'll see it hasn't fixed our problem here yet. That's because in Power Query, everything happens in an order. So we've got our custom column added here, but we don't replace the zeros until after that. So to fix that, all you have to do is grab replace values, move it up a step, and then click on your custom column to go back to the bottom, and you'll see that you now have your total revenue column with appropriate values all the way down. The next thing we want to do is add our bins to break these into some logical groups. You can certainly do this in Power BI, but that generally does it in same size bins and doesn't let you define it unless you get into some pretty complicated nested if statements that can be a little bit cumbersome. It's a lot easier to do here using what's called a conditional column. So we're going to go back to the Add Column tab at the top, click here, and instead of clicking on the custom column that we have, we're going to click on conditional column. And it's not available right now because I have all these highlighted. So I need to click off of those. Now we can click on conditional column, and that will give us the dialog box for conditional column. We're going to call this our account segment. Title like that. And now you have something of a wizard that will walk you through setting up some rules for what you want to do. So for us, we want to segment it based on our total revenue column. So we'll say if total revenue is less than, and for this I'm going to use a value of 150,000, and we're going to give it the output of very small so that we can say that that's a very small account. We want to do a little bit more than just segment it that way, so we're going to choose Add Clause. I'm going to hit this twice to add 2 rows because we're going to add 2 more rules here. And again, we're just going to say total revenue is less than, and in this case I'll say 1 million. We're going to call it then a small account. And then else if total revenue is less than 5 million, then it's a medium account. And lastly, I want it to do something if it's bigger than 5 million. I don't need to add another else if clause here. Down at the bottom, there's an else clause that I can use. So here I can just say else huge account. So as this looks down these revenue rows, it's going to apply these rules and it's going to bucket each account appropriately. Click OK, and it's applied the rules. Now everything you can see on my screen now says huge account, but that's just because of the way this is sorted. If I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see we get some medium accounts here, and then all the way down the bottom you get the small accounts and very small accounts. So the rule has worked, and it's applied the buckets that we want it to apply. And we're done with everything we need to do in Power Query. So just to illustrate how you can now use this, I'm going to choose from the Home tab, Close and Apply to load my data set. And I'm going to apply the changes, and it's going to load into my data model. And I'm going to click on this icon up at the top left to go to the Visualizations section. And I'm going to add a simple stacked bar chart like this so you can see what we're working with. I'll make it a little bit bigger to make this much easier to see. There we go. And from this data table now, I'm going to drag in our total revenue, that custom column that we created. And I'm going to take it from Access, and I'm actually going to put it in the Values tab, so it will show up. And if we want to segment that, we can take the Account Segment conditional column that we created, and we can drag that to our legend right here. And now you can see we have the number of accounts segmented using the account segment field that we created in Power Query. And that's all there is to creating custom bins. Hopefully this tip is useful to you. Let me know if you need anything else.